Have you ever noticed how the absolute most vital work in a community is usually like the quietest?
Oh, almost always. Yeah.
Right. I mean, just think about it for a second. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with volume. Like, we celebrate the
There's
disruptors.
loud innovators.
Exactly. The loud innovators, the
Yeah.
people who, build an app in a garage, get $1 billion valuation literally overnight, and then they're just front page news everywhere.
Right. It's the splashy stuff.
Yeah, but when you really look at the actual fabric of a town or, a city or a neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
the things that keep it from just actually falling apart, that work is usually happening completely in the background.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening in like the basement offices of community centers or in the passenger seats of minivans.
In waiting rooms at county clinics.
Yes, exactly. It is quiet. It's relentless. And honestly, most of the time, it is completely uncelebrated by the public.
Because it is the invisible infrastructure of our society.
Ooh, I like that. Invisible infrastructure.
Yeah, and fascinating thing about that invisible infrastructure is that it operates exactly like the physical infrastructure beneath our feet. Like, we don't think about the water mains, right?
Oh, never.
Or the power grids. You just flip a switch. You only think about the power grid when the lights go out.
Right. When something breaks.
Exactly. We only notice it when it fails. When there's a sudden visible crisis on the street, then we pay attention. But we rarely notice the people who are quietly averting those crises every single day, year after year. The people building the bridges that the rest of us just casually walk across without a second thought.
That is exactly it. And that concept, that transition of grassroots, on-the-ground compassion into literal systemic infrastructure, that is what we are exploring today.
This is such an important topic.
It really is. So we've got a stack of notes and excerpts today, all focused on an article titled A Legacy of Service, The Impact of Jamel Holder. And our mission for this deep dive is to really look at the anatomy of a life that is completely dedicated to exactly this kind of quiet foundational service.
Right.
We want to examine how, one person identifies the cracks in the foundation, and then rather than just pointing at them and complaining, they actively mix the cement to fill them.
And we are doing this at a remarkably timely moment.
We really, really are. Because just to set the context for you listening right now,
Right.
Today is May 6, 2026.
Right.
And just yesterday, so May 5, 2026, was officially declared Mrs. Jamel Holder Day in New York's 42nd Senate District.
Which is huge.
Massive. Yesterday, she was literally up in Albany, standing in the state capitol, receiving the 2026 Women of Distinction honor from New York State Senator James Skoufis.
Yeah.
So we are looking at this incredibly heavy on-the-ground work exactly one day after it received like massive statewide recognition.
And what's fascinating here is that looking at the culmination of these events isn't just about, reading a list of awards.
Right, that would be boring.
Exactly. If we simply read a resume of civic honors, that would be a very short and honestly very different conversation.
Yeah.
What we are actually looking at today is a blueprint. We are examining how someone builds solutions across entirely different sectors of human need. Because we're talking about housing instability, the foster care ecosystem, food insecurity, healthcare logistics. I mean, these are massive, complex systems.
They really are. They're bureaucracies.
Yeah, bureaucracies that usually swallow people whole. So we are looking at a masterclass in how to navigate and actually improve those systems from the ground up.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp the weight of what happened yesterday up in Albany, I think we first have to understand the actual architecture of civic recognition.
Definitely.
Because, look, we see politicians hand out these awards all the time.
Right? Constantly.
Yeah. And to play devil's advocate for a minute, it is incredibly easy to just dismiss them as like ceremonial photo ops.
Yeah.
A politician hands over a nice piece of acrylic, they take a photo for the local paper, everyone smiles and shakes hands, and then they all go home.
Right. It looks like a PR stunt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But structurally, like, what is actually happening when a government entity coffeefy a private citizen's work like this?
Yeah.
Why does it matter to someone who is busy doing the actual on-the-ground work?
Well, it is a critical question.
Yeah.
Because, for someone who is busy doing the heavy lifting in social services, an acrylic plaque does not pay the rent.
Yeah.
It doesn't feed a family in crisis.
Right.
But that isn't the function of the award. The function is credibility.
Okay.
Let's look at the timeline from our source material. Before the big Albany event, back on March 13th of this year, Mel Holder received the Distinguished Service Award from Orange County, and that was presented by legislator Janet Sutherland of the 18th District. Now, a county-level honor like that is fundamentally different from a state or national award
Also,
because it is grounded in immediate local visibility. The people who live in your direct radius, the local organizations you partner with every day, they're the ones vetting you.
ah, I see.
Yeah, it's not some distant committee reading an essay about you. It's the people who actually see you doing the work.
So it's not about ego. It's almost like a public audit.
Yes, a public audit is a great way to put it.
Right. Because when a county gives you a Distinguished Service Award, they're essentially providing a community-vetted seal of approval.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see how, like, if you were a grant writer or a community partner, that suddenly becomes a form of currency.
Precisely. It is the currency of trust. When a county legislature formally acknowledges someone's integrity and their impact, it sends a massive signal
To who?
to future partners, to funders, and honestly, importantly, to the vulnerable populations who actually need the help. It signals that this person is safe to partner with.
Wow. Yeah.
It transitions the work from just being, an isolated good deed into a recognized, vetted community asset.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the state-level honors in Albany.
Exactly.
So yesterday, she received a New York State Senate proclamation, and she actually observed the reading of the Women of Distinction resolution right there in the Senate chamber.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we hear terms like proclamation and resolution thrown around in like high school civics classes, but out in the real world, they have a very specific societal function.
They do. They're tools of historical preservation.
Okay, break that down for me. What is a proclamation, really?
So, according to the breakdown in the text, when a state senator issues a proclamation, they are officially documenting a person's service in the formal language of the state.
Like putting on the official record.
Exactly. They are taking all that quiet work we talked about, the late nights at the shelter, the logistical nightmares of organizing a food drive, and they are making it a permanent part of the state's historical record.
Right.
And then the resolution takes it even a step further.
How is a resolution different from a proclamation?
Well, a proclamation is generally issued by an individual official, right? Like one senator. But a resolution is an official expression of the entire legislative body.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, observing that being read in the Senate chamber places the honor directly within the physical and procedural environment of the state government.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. It essentially dictates that this work is worthy of recognition in the exact same halls where the state's laws are actually made.
So for you listening right now, when you see these civic honors handed out in your own town, when you see a photo in your local paper of someone holding up a proclamation, you are not just witnessing a PR stunt.
No, not at all.
You are witnessing a community or an entire state actively deciding what its values are.
Exactly.
They are choosing to preserve those specific values in the historical ledger. They are saying, this right here, this is the standard we want on the record for future generations.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this whole architecture of recognition proves that community service is not inherently invisible forever. It might begin quietly, sure, but its impact compounds over time. It ripples outward until it eventually speaks so loudly that the state apparatus basically has no choice but to recognize it.
I love that.
Okay.
But to your earlier point, the recognition obviously didn't create the impact.
No, definitely.
The impact was built through decades of just grinding, emotionally taxing labor.
Right.
And that is exactly where we need to go next, because those awards didn't just fall out of the sky yesterday. We have to look at the mechanics of the actual work, like where did this even start? And a massive, massive chapter in this story is her decade of service at a Salvation Army homeless shelter down in Queens, New York.
This period is absolutely foundational. I mean, it is where we see the transition from the architecture of recognition, which we just talked about, to the actual architecture of the work itself.
Yeah, and the statistic from the source material here is frankly staggering.
It is.
During her time in Queens, she helped more than 91 families secure stability, resources, and pathways to permanent housing.
91 families.
91 families. And we really need to pause on that number for a second, because that doesn't just mean 91 people.
Yeah.
That represents parents, children, fearful nights, emergency medical needs, and completely upended lives.
Moving just one single family from homelessness to permanent housing is a monumental task.
Right.
Doing it for 91 families requires a level of administrative stamina and honestly emotional fortitude that most people cannot even begin to fathom.
Yeah.
Because homelessness is never just about lacking a building.
Right. It's not just, oh, I don't have a house.
Exactly. It is always an interception of multiple cascading crises.
You know, I used to think of case management as like a sort of labyrinth.
Okay.
Like you are a guide, and you are guiding someone through a maze to find the exit. And the exit is permanent housing.
Right. That's the typical analogy.
Yeah, but looking at the actual mechanisms involved here from the text, a labyrinth isn't quite right, because a labyrinth is static. The walls don't move.
Ah, I see where you're going.
This is more like navigating a labyrinth, where the walls are constantly moving and the floor is literally dropping out from under you.
Yes.
The walls are like eviction histories, credit checks,
Yeah.
lost identification documents, and just a maze of bureaucratic red tape.
Mm-hmm.
And the person you are guiding through this maze is carrying an immense weight, the weight of trauma, of financial panic,
Yeah.
of pure, raw survival instinct.
That captures the friction perfectly,
Yeah.
because that intersection of crises means you are dealing with financial hardship, housing insecurity, employment barriers, childcare issues, and health concerns all simultaneously.
Right. It's never just one thing.
Never. Look at it this way. If you somehow find a family, an apartment, right,
Okay.
but they don't have affordable childcare lined up, well, then they can't maintain the employment needed to actually pay for that apartment.
Right. So the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly. Or say they do have employment, but then a sudden health crisis drains whatever tiny savings they had. Boom, they lose the apartment again.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. So untangling those threads requires relentless, hands-on advocacy.
So what does that actually look like mechanically? Like on a random Tuesday morning in Queens, what is Mel actually doing? It's obviously not just handing someone a pamphlet with a 1-800 number on it.
No,
Yeah.
not at all. It looks like spending literally hours on hold with municipal agencies.
Ah, the worst.
Right. It looks like tracking down a birth certificate from 3 states away just so a child can be legally enrolled in school.
Wow.
Because if the child is in school, that finally frees up the parent to attend a job interview.
It's a domino effect.
Yes. It involves filling out endless streams of documentation, applying for housing vouchers, verifying strict income limits, communicating with, very hesitant landlords.
Because landlords don't always want to accept vouchers.
Exactly. And doing all of this while managing the immediate emotional crisis of a family sitting across from your desk who literally does not know where they are sleeping that night.
That is heavy.
It requires managing the absolute micro details of a massive bureaucracy while simultaneously holding space for profound human suffering.
And she did that for a decade.
10 years.
I mean, the emotional toll of constantly being the shock absorber for other people's absolute worst days, it's immense.
It really is.
But that really sets the baseline for her defining trait throughout this whole article. She meets people exactly at their point of need, no matter how messy or complicated that need actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And what is really incredible to me is that when she eventually relocated to Middletown, New York, she didn't just, retire from this kind of heavy lifting.
Right. You shouldn't take a break.
No. She pivoted. She took those exact same skills, navigating complex systems, deep empathy, administrative stamina, and she applied them to a totally different vulnerable population.
Yes, she entered the foster care ecosystem. She took on the role of recruiting and training foster parents. And this is just a brilliant application of her skill set, because the foster system is arguably one of the most complex, emotionally fraught bureaucracies in existence.
Oh, absolutely. And, when you think about the foster system, the focus is almost always entirely on the child.
Which makes sense.
Right, obviously. But her work focused intensely on the caregivers. The text mentions she organized and facilitated foster parent support groups.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first read that, I immediately thought of that old cliche, about putting your own oxygen mask on first before helping the person sitting next to you on the plane.
Right, self-care.
Yeah. But the more I looked at the actual mechanics of foster care, the more I realized that metaphor kind of falls short.
Oh, how so?
Well, an oxygen mask is just a quick burst of air. It's an emergency intervention. But this is about long-term structural integrity. It is much more like structural fatigue in engineering.
Okay, I like this. Break that down.
So in engineering, the load-bearing pillars of a bridge, they take on invisible microfractures from just bearing the weight of traffic over time.
Mm-hmm.
And from the outside, the bridge looks totally fine. But without constant maintenance and reinforcement, those tiny microfractures connect. The pillar snaps, and the whole structure just drops a load.
Right.
Foster parents, are the load-bearing pillars of the child welfare system.
Wow. Yes.
They are taking on the incredible weight of a child's trauma, their grief, their behavioral challenges. And without a support group, without someone actively reinforcing them, they experience secondary trauma. The microfractures build up.
And then they snap.
Exactly. And if the parent burns out and quits the program, the child gets bounced to yet another home, which just completely compounds the child's original trauma.
What's fascinating here is that by building these specific support groups, she was directly stabilizing the children by maintaining the structural integrity of the parents.
Exactly.
Because foster parents don't just need training manuals on how to fill out, like, incident reports.
No, they can read a manual on their own.
Right. They need actual people who understand the profound emotional weight they are carrying. They need a safe community where they can express frustration or fear or grief without any judgment from the state.
And her specific approach to this was recognized by the North American Family Institute. They awarded her the Spirit of the Community Award.
Mm-hmm.
And that word spirit really stands out to me in the text.
It's a very specific word choice.
It is. It implies
Mhm.
something way beyond just clocking in at 9 a.m. and filing the paperwork on time.
Well, it highlights the difference between performing a task and fulfilling a purpose.
Okay, say more about that.
You can have two caseworkers who both technically check all the right boxes and file the state forms on time.
Right. On paper, they look identical.
Exactly. But one does it completely mechanically just to get through the day, and the other does it with genuine consistency, deep compassion, and a real understanding of the humanity of the person sitting across the desk. The Spirit of the Community Award honors those intangible values that actually keep a community intact: the trust, the advocacy, and the relational connection.
Which brings us to a really, really interesting intersection in her timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Because emotional support and navigating bureaucracy are vital, obviously. But you also have to address the immediate physiological realities of poverty.
Right, the physical needs.
Yeah, you have to deal with the fact that people are physically hungry today.
Yes.
And this leads us directly into her current work at the Salvation Army in Middletown, where she serves as both the office administrator and the social services coordinator.
This role is like the ultimate synthesis of her entire background.
It really seems like it.
Because she is managing youth programming, emergency support, and social service referrals all at once. And that demands an incredibly rare hybrid of skills.
Right.
On one side of the ledger, you need extreme administrative precision, right? Scheduling, inventory management, documentation, coordination.
Spreadsheet stuff.
Exactly. But on the other side, you need immediate crisis response capabilities. You have to be able to de-escalate panic, address sudden eviction threats, and physically provide food to people in distress.
Wow.
She is essentially organizing empathy into an operational supply chain.
Organizing empathy into an operational supply chain. I mean, that is exactly it. Because empathy alone doesn't feed a neighborhood.
No, it doesn't.
You can have all the compassion in the world for a family facing food insecurity, but if you don't have the hard logistical infrastructure to source the food, store it safely, and distribute it fairly, that family stays hungry.
It's just feelings at that point.
Exactly. And that brings us to the Feeding Orange County Coalition.
Mm-hmm. The Thanksgiving drive.
Yes, the Thanksgiving turkey and food drive. She helped lead alongside Senator Scoofies and the local pantries. It's a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
They distributed meals to more than 200 families. But the volume, the 200 families, isn't actually the most compelling part of this story to me.
No, it's the mechanism.
Right. The mechanism of distribution is what stands out. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
She didn't just set up a standard distribution line. She worked tirelessly to transform the community space into a walk-through grocery store experience. So attendees could walk through the aisles and physically select their own canned goods, their own proteins, and their own fresh vegetables.
It's a completely different model.
It is. And look, I looked at this grocery store model in the text, and at first, honestly, I thought, this seems incredibly inefficient.
Okay, from a logistical standpoint?
Yeah, from a pure logistical standpoint. If you have 200 families coming, it is significantly faster and requires way less volunteer power to just pre-pack 200 identical cardboard boxes.
Sure.
You line the cars up in the parking lot, and you shove a box into each trunk as they drive by. Boom, boom, boom. Done in 2 hours.
Very efficient.
Right. Why go through the massive headache of setting up physical shelves, organizing all the inventory by category, and having people slowly browse the aisles? But then I realized this isn't an efficiency play at all.
No.
It's a psychology tray.
Yeah.
It is entirely about agency.
You've hit on the absolute core philosophy of her work here. Choice is the foundation of dignity.
Yes.
Think about the psychological mechanics of poverty for a second. Poverty is a state of constant restriction.
Right.
It strips you of your agency. It dictates where you can afford to live, what you can afford to wear, and exactly what you can eat. You are perpetually at the mercy of systems and bureaucracies telling you what you are allowed to have.
Yeah, you have no control.
Right. So when you hand someone a pre-packed box of food, even with the absolute best of intentions,
Which it usually is.
of course, but you are subtly reinforcing that exact lack of control. You're essentially saying, here is what we have decided you need today. Take it and be grateful.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
It unintentionally chips away at their humanity, but the grocery store model completely flips that dynamic.
Right, because it restores the agency.
Exactly. It allows a mother to walk down an aisle and say, you know what? My kids actually hate kidney beans, but they love carrots, so I am going to choose the carrots today.
It normalizes the experience.
Yes, it normalizes the experience of providing for your family. It doesn't feel like a charity handout. It feels like shopping.
And that is what we call the architecture of dignity.
Perfectly said.
It is systemic service that actively respects the individual rather than immediate service that just treats them as a demographic statistic to be fed.
It's brilliant. She is physically building spaces where people can hold on to their dignity while their most desperate needs are being met.
And speaking of building systems,
Yeah.
this naturally bridges into one of the most unexpected and really impressive pivots in her entire trajectory.
Yes, the 2025 pivot.
Right. We've talked about housing, we've talked about foster care, we've talked about food security, but her deep immersion in these social safety nets revealed another massive hidden barrier in the community. And she didn't just, write a strongly worded letter to the editor about it.
Yeah.
She literally built a business to solve it.
This is such a crucial evolution in her story. In 2025, she co-founded SwiftAid Transport,
Right.
which is a non-emergency medical transportation company, or NEMT.
And for anyone who isn't familiar with NEMT, I want to frame it this way.
Okay.
In the global shipping and logistics industry, the biggest headache is always the last mile problem.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
You can easily get a huge shipping container across the Pacific Ocean on a massive freighter.
Very efficiently.
Yeah, and you can get it across the country on a freight train.
Right.
But getting that specific tiny package from the local distribution center to a customer's specific front door, that last mile is the absolute most complex, expensive, and fragile part of the entire supply chain.
It's where everything breaks down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
NEMT is the last mile problem, but applied to human health. We have built this insane multi-billion-dollar medical apparatus. We have state-of-the-art hospitals, incredible oncologists, life-saving dialysis machines, and advanced physical therapy clinics.
Right.
But if a senior citizen with mobility issues, or like a mother recovering from surgery, cannot get a reliable $15 ride from their apartment to the clinic door, that entire multi-billion-dollar system completely fails them.
It's honestly staggering when you break down the mechanics of it. The cascade effect of a transportation failure is devastating.
Break down that cascade effect for me.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the sequence. If you miss a ride, you miss your medical appointment.
Right.
If you miss the appointment, your care is delayed. Delayed care inevitably leads to worsening health outcomes.
Because the condition doesn't just pause.
Exactly, it gets worse.
No.
Which often results in an emergency room visit down the line. And the ER is the absolute most expensive, stressful, and inefficient form of healthcare possible. For individuals with chronic conditions that require very frequent visits, like dialysis or chemotherapy, transportation is not a convenience.
Oh.
It is a literal lifeline. It is the physical manifestation of access to care.
And Mel saw this paradox firsthand.
Yes, she did.
During her years in social services, she saw clients whose health was deteriorating simply because they couldn't physically get to the doctors who could help them. The bureaucracy of, Medicaid cabs or just totally unreliable public transit was literally making people sicker.
Right.
So SwiftAid Transport wasn't just some random startup idea she pulled out of the ether to capitalize on a hot market trend.
No, it wasn't a tech bro idea.
Right. It was born directly from lived experience and really sharp community observation. She saw the gap as a social worker, and she decided to fill it as an entrepreneur.
Which brings a completely different ethos to the company. The mission of SwiftAid is explicitly stated in our material. No individual should be left behind because transportation stands between them and the care they need.
It's so direct.
It is. She translated pure community service into hard business infrastructure.
And this detail brings us right back to yesterday's events in Albany. Because there is something incredibly rare and telling in the official New York State Senate proclamation issued by Senator Skoufis.
Yes.
The proclamation officially, explicitly names SwiftAid Transport.
Right.
Now, why is that significant? Why would the state government use a civic honor to name-drop a private transportation company? I mean, that's highly unusual. Right?
It is very unusual, but it happens because it demonstrates how values shape operations, and the state clearly recognized that distinction here.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Most businesses are created simply to capture market share.
To make money.
Right. But SwiftAid was created to respond to a documented human crisis. By explicitly naming the company in the proclamation, the state is giving this private business a public historical origin story rooted in compassion. It signals to hospitals, to clinics, and most importantly to patients that this is not just a taxi circle trying to maximize their daily volume.
Right, it's not just an Uber.
Exactly. It is a community care partner. When the founders of the company have spent decades working in homeless shelters and food pantries, they do not treat their riders as mere waypoints on a GPS.
No.
They treat them as vulnerable human beings who require safety, transparency, and dignity.
It fundamentally changes the DNA of the service.
Absolutely.
If your driver understands the psychological weight of poverty and chronic illness, that ride to the dialysis clinic is going to be handled with a totally different level of care.
It truly is. It changes everything about the interaction.
And as we start to, look at the unifying thread of all these different chapters, what we might call the ripple effect of her work, we have to examine the personal foundation driving this multi-decade effort. Because you don't survive the emotional meat grinder of housing case management and then build a foster support network and run a food pantry and launch a medical transport company just because you're a workaholic.
No, you'd burn out in a year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The burnout rate in these fields is astronomically high. To sustain this level of output across all these different sectors requires an incredibly solid foundation.
Right.
And her foundation, as noted in the text, is deeply personal. Her roles as a devoted wife and mother aren't like compartmentalized away from her public service.
They aren't separate lives.
No, they are the bedrock of it. They shape her values, her discipline, and her deep sense of responsibility.
She operates from a place of integrity, faith, and purpose.
Yeah.
And the text really emphasizes that.
Yeah. Let's break those down.
Well, integrity means doing the grueling, unglamorous work when absolutely no one is watching, when there are no cameras and no proclamations from Albany.
Right. The quiet work.
Exactly. And faith, in this specific context, is the radical belief in the value of people, even when society has marginalized them or when they are at their absolute lowest point.
Wow.
And purpose is the understanding that your life's work is intrinsically tied to the well-being of your neighbors.
So what does this all mean for the wider world? When Senator Skoufis brought her to Albany for the Women of Distinction honor yesterday, it was obviously a profound, wonderful moment for Mel and her family.
Of course.
But it was also about what she represents on a macro level. Why is an honor like Women of Distinction so vital for our society to observe and celebrate?
Because it elevates relational labor to the level of state importance.
Okay, relational labor, explain that.
Well, women historically and overwhelmingly lead in spaces where the work is deeply relational, emotionally taxing, and structurally vital.
Right.
They are the ones organizing the care networks, managing the family crises, running the support groups, and literally holding the community together.
Yeah, keeping the fabric intact.
Exactly. But because this work doesn't usually result in, a flashy tech IPO or a massive corporate merger, it is frequently totally invisible in the historical record.
Because it doesn't have a massive dollar amount attached to it.
Right. So this honor forces society to look at that foundational leadership and acknowledge that without it, the whole system collapses.
It is a massive validation.
It is.
It says to every woman out there who is, quietly organizing a food drive or advocating for a troubled child in the school system or just driving an elderly neighbor to a chemo appointment. Your work is real. It has weight. It matters.
Yes.
And that leads us to this concept from the article of a legacy in motion.
I love this phrase.
Me too. Because we usually treat the word legacy as a posthumous concept, right?
Right, like what happens after you die.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
what you leave behind after you retire or after you're gone.
Yeah.
It's the brick building named after you. But that's a very passive way to look at it.
A passive legacy is static, but Mel Holder's legacy is highly active. It is functioning right now, today.
Exactly. It is active right now in the 91 families who woke up this morning in permanent housing instead of a transient shelter.
Yes.
It is active in the foster parents who didn't give up on a troubled kid last night because they had a support group to lean on. It is active in the family who got to choose their own groceries and maintain their dignity. And it is active in the senior citizen who will safely make it to their doctor's appointment tomorrow morning in a SwiftAid van.
Right. A legacy in motion is a living, breathing infrastructure of care.
And that brings us perfectly full circle to the events of May 5, 2026.
Yesterday in Albany.
Yesterday. The recognition in the Senate chamber, the proclamation, Mrs. Jamel Holder Day. None of those things created Mel Holder's impact.
No.
They simply revealed it to the state. The awards do not erase the thousands of hard, exhausting, quiet days that came before them.
They honor them.
Right.
They validate the late nights, the endless paperwork, the emotional weight, and the relentless problem solving.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today.
We really have.
We started by analyzing the actual civic function of state and county honors.
Right.
We went deep into the complex mechanics of homelessness and case management in Queens. We looked at the structural fatigue of foster parents and the vital need for caregiver support. We debated the efficiency versus the psychology of a walk-through food pantry, exploring the architecture of dignity.
Right.
And we examined how pure empathy can literally launch a medical transportation business to solve the last-mile healthcare problem.
If there is an overarching takeaway for you, the listener, today, it is a total redefinition of what public service actually looks like.
Yeah.
True public service isn't restricted to a politician running for office or a billionaire cutting a charity check.
No.
It happens in the trenches. It happens in pantries and shelters, behind the wheel of a transport van, and in the meticulous behind-the-scenes administration of complex social systems.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Okay.
Jamel Holder looked at the landscape of her community, and she didn't just accept the way things were running. She trained herself to look for the cracks. She saw the hidden lack of dignity in a traditional food line. She saw the absurd paradox of a world-class healthcare system failing because someone lacked a simple $15 ride to the clinic.
Right.
And most importantly, she didn't wait for someone else to fix it. She decided to build the bridges over those gaps herself.
Exactly.
So take a look at your own life. Look at your workplace, your neighborhood, your child's school, or your local community center. What is the invisible service gap that everyone else is walking right past because it seems too messy or too complicated or just too quiet to bother with?
Right.
And what would it look like if you decided to be the one to quietly build a bridge over it?
It's a great question.
It really is. Well, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.